Hey guys! So, in this video we are going to talk about imposter syndrome. So let's get into it. What is imposter syndrome? Well, I'm glad you asked. So, there are a few definitions, but I'll just give you the one that I've been told. Imposter syndrome is the sensation that a person can have when they come in to a group, if you will, or to any context basically, and they feel like they are a guest, that they are not part of that group. They're simply a person who is, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. Most people associate it with a negative thing, but just think of it as being a guest in somebody else's house, and you don't feel as if this is your place. So I have worked with a few people like this, and I've been that person for quite a while. To be that person, this is especially true for somebody who's just joining a company. And for the juniors out there, you may have imposter syndrome for a lot of years, because it's fairly closely, it ties together to so many things as to why you feel like you don't belong, or that the code that you're writing, it's not your code, it's somebody else's code, and so forth and so forth. There's so many things that play into this that it's hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what it is that makes you feel this way. But I'll give it a little bit of a whirl and see if I can give you some type of, at least I'll share the insights that I had on it, because I can only do a little bit of self-reflection and figure out, okay, why did I feel this imposter syndrome phenomenon? And what did I do in order to stop feeling that way? Well, the way it started out for me when it came to imposter syndrome, I can tell you right now, it took me, at my previous job, and this is like completely subconscious. I didn't even think about the fact that this was happening. It was actually my manager who told me that, Frederick, why are you doing this? Oh, I'll explain first. So whenever I would refer to changes in the code or things that we were working on, or I was talking about the company, I would always say things such as, how are you doing things here? How do you want me to fix this? I was always referring to a them, me type of things in them and me, if that makes sense. I would unconsciously always talk about my coworkers and my company as if I wasn't part of it, as if I was just this visitor there. And that's the way I thought about it. Everything I did, I mean, this was on my code base. It's been here for so long. I didn't write this from scratch. I felt like the code had been around for longer than I've even been working. It's been around for, like, the system as a whole had been around for longer than I had been alive. How could I possibly feel ownership or feel like I was somebody who fit in here? I mean, this is not my code. That's how I felt about it. And you see, the thing is, what happened was that it created this barrier, this distance between me and my coworkers. And it didn't have to be that way. It was all down to me. I felt like I wasn't part of the team. I felt like they were all one group and I was the other group. Now, let's be honest here. It could have been a little bit of it was tied into the fact that I was a single front-end developer working in a team of all PHP back-end developers. So I became a little bit, I'm gonna be honest, I became a little bit isolated. And it was nobody's fault. My boss tried very hard to kind of mitigate that, and I adore him for it. It kind of worked. There was still a little bit of a barrier there, but I think on the whole it worked out very nicely. So this was at my previous job. Today I don't feel any type of imposter syndrome whatsoever. I don't feel the sensation that I'm not part of the group or that I'm not part of things is basically completely gone. And I think that the biggest reason why it is gone comes down to two main things. The first and foremost thing that changed was that I, as an individual, matured. I felt that it's like I started having this perspective that it was actually a lesson taught to me at my first job by one of my favorite coworkers ever. He taught me so much, and he said that because I was at the time asking a thing, I mean, I had all these questions, right? And one of the big questions was, how am I supposed to think? How am I supposed to work so that my boss becomes happy? And like, how should I structure things, and how should I treat my boss, and so forth? And my coworker said, so Frederick, you just treat them as you would treat any customer. Think of this as just you, like, don't get too bogged down in like the personality traits and like good bosses, bad bosses, and so forth. Just be a professional, or rather try to think of it as a professional would. You're not trying to be your boss's best friend. You're trying to have a good working relationship and do the things that are expected of you. Start there and see how that works out for you. And I did that for a while, and it took a while until I started feeling like I could kind of be professional. In the beginning I was very emotional. I suppose to a degree I still am, but it's at least a thought that helped me out. So the second thing that helped me to deal with this imposter syndrome phenomenon was that I started working for a company where where you are expected to take ownership. Just let me walk you through this. So when I worked at the big company where like the code base was massive, it was all down to like there was so vast amount of code, there was so much code. Like there was no way nobody at the company knew everything about the code base because the code base was so massive, and you never got ownership of something. The system was so complicated that you could never ever deliver, like very rarely at least, deliver on a complete concept. You never got the sensation that you were responsible for a feature or a suite of features. You were simply someone, or that's how the company, like, you can almost think about the code. The system was so massive, it was almost treated as like this big beast where all the developers were just people trying to make the beast do what everybody wanted things to do, but nobody like controlled this phenomenon of a system. And my imposter syndrome left me completely now that I'm at a new company, because the system itself is something that I control. It does not own me, I own the system. It's so hard to define this, but think of it this way. I have almost full understanding of all the parts that make up the system. I know the code, I know the different projects, I know what they're supposed to be doing, I know how they work. I don't know every single line of code, of course, it's too big for that, but I have a sensation that I know this stuff. And when I work, my boss tells me what I need to do, not how to do it. Not exactly every single little detail. It's not like I have a lot of personal freedom, and to some people that's very scary. Personal freedom makes and it is a little bit scary, because when you have personal freedom, it becomes a little bit like when you have to take responsibility. It becomes more on you. You are more accountable for how things play out. So you have to step up your game. You can't just be a code monkey and just write the code and never think about it. You have to think about more than just the software that you are writing. More responsibility is a good and a bad thing. But what that increased responsibility does, from my perspective, is that it grows ownership. Because if you get a more loose working environment where it really comes down to how much of an investment you want to make, how good of a job you want to do, and well, basically how much freedom you have in making decisions on behalf of the company. You start feeling like you own the solution that you provided. And when you feel like you own the thing, even though the code technically is the company's, but when you feel like you own the code that you just produced and gave to the company, that's when imposter syndrome stops being such a massive part of your life. And I'll add a bonus thing as well. that has nothing to do with code. If you are the sort of person who eats lunch alone, never goes out and sits with the others, never talks to your co-worker, you never go out and eat lunch with your co-workers, things of that nature. If you are isolating yourself from your co-workers, imposter syndrome is never going to leave you. But that's down to you. And I can't really tell you why you're doing that. All I can say is that for your own sake, don't isolate yourself, because I'm pretty sure that when it all comes down to it, you're a pretty interesting person to talk to. I would be surprised if you're not. Have a great day.